Hey, Algebra 2, this is Mr. Szybisty, and today we are going to talk about C1, which is solving quadratics. There are going to be 3 videos in Unit C, and all we do in them are solve quadratics. This is our first one that introduces us to the basics. There are 3 key things that you need to know when we are solving a quadratics. The first one is that we want to make sure that one side of our equation is equal to 0. And in the video, we're going to learn about 2 different solution methods. One uses the factoring that we practiced in Unit B, and the other uses what's called the quadratic formula. We'll see that in just a second. If you choose this first one, factoring, then the last bit here applies to you. Set factors equal to 0 and solve. And we're going to see that when we actually go through and do the factoring. The last thing we'll do is we'll set the factors equal to 0 and solve. But let's move on and find out a bit more about the quadratic formula. Anytime you're trying to solve a quadratic equation, and something like that might look like 3x squared plus 4x plus 1 equals 0, we can use the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula is x equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2 times a. And when we say a, b, and c, we mean the same a, b, and c that was in our factoring. A is 3, b is 4, and c is 1. And remember what we said before, we want to get one side equal to 0. That's what it looks like. That's one side and it's equal to 0. Now let's go through 2 examples. One of them will do factoring, the other will do quadratic formula. The very first thing that I need to do with this, 6x squared minus 7x equals 5, is I have to get one side equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 5 on both sides. So I have 6x squared minus 7x minus 5 equals 0. Notice that I cannot combine any of these terms because this one's an x squared, this one's an x, and this one doesn't have an x. Let's use quadratic formula to solve this one. In this case, a equals 6, b equals negative 7, and c equals negative 5. And we can look back to see quadratic formula, but it's going to be written like this. X equals the opposite of b. Well, b is negative 7. The opposite of negative 7 is positive 7, plus or minus the square root of b squared. Negative 7 times negative 7 is a positive 49, minus 4 times a times c divided by 2 times a. So 4 times 6 times negative 5 is negative 120. So x equals 7 plus or minus the square root of 49 minus a negative 120, but I can just write plus 120 divided by 12. 49 plus 120 is 169. X equals 7 plus or minus the square root of 169 over 12. And the square root of 169 is 13. So x equals 7 plus or minus 13 over 12. Now we've come to a point in our problem where there's a plus or minus, and I need to handle this separately. So from here, I'm going to go to the 2 different options. What the plus or minus means is that there are 2 options. One of them is the plus, the other is the minus. With this one over here, the numerator, 7 plus 13, is 20. And 20 divided by 12 is 5 over 3. So that is going to be one of my answers. With the one on the right, 7 minus 13 is negative 6 over 12. And negative 6 divided by 12 is negative 1/2. There are my 2 answers. When we are dealing with a quadratic, we are guaranteed that there will be 2 answers or 2 solutions to every one of our problems. Now let's move on to the next example. Instead of using quadratic formula, we'll be doing factoring. Here we have 15x squared plus 3x minus 6 equals 5x squared plus 14x. The very first thing that I need to do is get one side equal to 0, and that means I can subtract things over to the other side. So I could do minus 5x squared on both sides. Let me line up the x squareds there. And minus 14x on both sides. Let me line up the x's. So that when I add these through, I'll have 10x squared minus 11x minus 6 equals 0. Now I have one side equal to 0. And I can now use factoring in order to solve this. It's got three terms, which means I need to do blank times blank equals blank plus blank equals. Now this is going to be your A times C number, and this will be your B. So negative 60 up here and negative 11. So I need to come up with the two numbers that multiply to give me negative 60 and add to give me negative 11. Those two numbers are negative 15 and 4. Negative 15 and 4. So now I can rewrite the original trinomial, minus 11x minus 6, and I can break up the middle term using these two numbers as the two new middle terms. So the first stays the same, and then minus 15x plus 4x minus 6. So now we group, plus in the middle. Out of the first group here, the GCF is a 5x, so I can bring that outside. I'm left with 2x minus 3. Out of the second group, the GCF between 4 and 6 is also 2, and I'm left with 2x minus 3. So my two factors are 2x minus 3 and 5x plus 2. Now at the very start of this, I told you that there was a third step whenever you factored, and that third step is to set your factors equal to 0 and solve. So this is what that looks like. Set your factors equal to 0 and solve means 2x minus 3 is a factor, and I say it equals 0, and 5x plus 2 equals 0. That's setting your factors equal to 0, and they both get their own equal sign. Now I can go through and I can solve for x. With the one on the left, I could add 3 to both sides. So 2x is equal to 3, and then divide both sides by 2, so x equals 3 halves. The one on the left, I could subtract 2 from both sides. And that would give me 5x is equal to negative 2, and then divide 5 on both sides. So these would cancel. X equals negative 2/5. And there you have your two answers. Again, we had a quadratic, which means we had two answers. We'll talk in class about something called the fundamental theorem of algebra that explains why we always get two answers. We'll have to wait for class for that. Now it's time for a U-try. All right, everybody, it's time for this U-try. 6x squared plus 11x plus 3 equals 0. You've already got this equal to 0, so you can either use factoring, like we did in example 2, or you can use the quadratic formula, like we did in example 1. The choice is yours. Go ahead, pause the video, try your solution method, give it a good shot, and then I'll let you know the answers in just a couple seconds. The two answers that we should get are x equals negative 3 over 2 and x equals negative 1/3. Go back through your work. If you did something wrong, try to figure out what you did wrong. If you did it right, congratulations. Can't wait to see you in class so we can do more practice with solving quadratics, both using factoring and using the quadratic formula. I'll see you guys later.